I'm going to cover a little bit of more recent history and try and tease in some of the projects and activities and adventures that we've been on in the last 20 odd years or so. I ought to warn you as well, just to give you a heads up, that we do have some images of some human remains coming up. So for those of you a bit squeamish, you've forewarned. Has anybody been to Norton Priory before? Yes, that's the right answer. Thank you. If you haven't been to Norton Priory before, we are Norton Priory Museum and Gardens, very important part of the title. We sit within the Liverpool City region in the borough of Holton, but we're near Runcorn in Cheshire. So you can see from that map that you can easily get to us on the motorway network. So we look forward to seeing you soon because we're all year round. So you've no excuse now. The Norton Priory Museum Trust has existed as an independent charity, a bit like the SMA, since the 3rd of November 1975, so we really have just had our birthday. The site now covers 42 acres. You can see it's split in two parts on this map by the expressway that runs through the middle. The northern half has a 2.5 acre Georgian wall garden. We've got a sculpture trail, we've got a ha-ha wall and an ice house. And the other half is formed, the southern boundary at least, is formed by the Bridgewater Canal. And on that part of the site, we've got the museum, we've got woodlands, we've got more sculptures, we've got an adventure playground, we've even got musical instruments. But even more important than that, we are Europe's most excavated monastic site. And here is the story as told on the original gallery videos in the 1980s. Is it going to talk to us, Liz? No, it's not. So apologies for that. But it gives you a little bit of an insight into the type of technology that we had on display back then. It just tells you at the time that it was England's most excavated monastic site. So apologies for that. The community excavations that you just saw in that video had revealed the main monastic spaces. So that's mostly the nave, the church, the cloister, the refectory, the dormitories and the chapter house. The finds included one of the most elaborate 13th century arcades discovered in England, a nationally important collection of medieval floor tiles, and very many medieval skeletons. They're important for the story that's going to come up in a minute. Patrick Green, that you can see here, led the large-scale excavations from 1971 right the way through to 1987. And bless him, he's described it as quite literally a groundbreaking project. Couldn't be more perfect. But we mustn't forget that actually the first director of excavations at Norton was actually Grosvenor Museum. And here the first trench is on the 1st of June 1970 with a group after Thorn over prison who were nearing their sentence. So we're aware how archaeology can attract people as a respite and a sort of interactive. We did it in the 1970s with a group of prisoners. Trenches, and they confirmed the location of the east and west end of the nave and the south and east cloister ranges. Because the results of this preliminary work were so impressive, the Runcorn Development Corporation went on to commission Patrick Green to take more serious investigations on. The Development Corporation at the time were creating a new town, in inverted commas, of Runcorn, and they wanted to give the people that were moving into that space a sense of history and place. And I think it's really very much thanks to the vision of the corporation and the innovative at the time community involvement that Patrick Green got up and running. I think Norton Priory still has a very strong place in the development, not just of archaeology, but I think we can consider it as one of the very first true community excavations. The newspaper cuttings of the time, I had great fun looking through all these. The newspaper cuttings show us that the finds were really quite spectacular that were coming up, and eventually that led to the call for a new museum or a museum to be created, and the first one opened in 1982. I think if you haven't been to Norton, I think it's still one of Norton's strongest points that we have a bespoke museum right next door to the site where the finds came from. Patrick's PhD thesis was published in 1989 under the title Norton Priory, the Archaeology of Medieval Religious House. And in 2008, thanks to funding from English Heritage, the finds and the other post-ex analysis was published in the Oxford North monograph, Norton Priory, Monastery to Museum. So I'm afraid I can't quite take claim to the title of this talk. I didn't come up with it. As Chris Howard-Davis from Oxford Archaeology North said, the information yet to be drawn from this site is immense and can only add to its significance within the field of monastic archaeological studies in Britain and abroad. By the mid-2000s, the combination of these publications, and by now what was pretty much a failing museum, it had been there since 1982, made it clear that we needed very much a new strategic approach to everything. We also needed a museum that wasn't leaking, if I'm really honest. The Brooke family had bought the former monastic lands and buildings in 1545, and they lived at Norton continuously right the way through until the 1920s. The Buck Brothers engraving that you see there was published in 1752. It shows what Norton would have looked like just as the Brooks bought the estate. So you can see the long building is what's now our Undercroft building, gate going up the car park, and also the guest quarters there. Also on that image, you might just be able to see on an alcove on that long wall a figure, and that figure is a giant statue of St Christopher. He's a rare medieval survival of religious sculpture from late medieval England. He's carved from red sandstone. He's twice life size, so he stands 3.37 metres, that's just over 11 foot high. He weighs 1¼ ton, promise I haven't tried to lift him, and the largest surviving medieval statue of St Christopher in Britain. Later on, as you see on that photograph, he becomes a very posh garden ornament for the Brooke family, poshest garden gnome I've ever seen. And later on, and the one on the far side there, as he is in our museum atrium now. But obviously in the medieval period, he was much more impressive in terms of colour. And this is illustrations thanks to John Larson, who did some work on the statue. He's now retired, but was head of sculpture conservation for NML. He was very much more a theatrical piece. He's very impressive. He still is now, but if you can imagine him in colour. And he was probably commissioned, although I'll never be able to prove it, as a part of celebrations in 1391 when Norton became an abbey. As time went by, the Brooke family significantly rebuilt the buildings they purchased, but each time they encased and repurposed the 12th century Undercroft building within the family home. And if you come to Norton Priory today, you can still enjoy the finest Norman arch in Cheshire and also all of these beautiful vaulted spaces. And just as a plug, if you're planning on getting married, we also do weddings. The basement plan that you can see here from 1853 shows the southern wing of the manor house. You've got the scullery, the servants' hall, the brew house, the kitchen, the butler's pantry. It's all terribly Downton Abbey. And the inset shows you how this plan relates to the east and the east end of the church, and also the museum, which is that silver square that you can see. As we know, the early digs are concentrated on revealing the monastic layout, and the questions obviously remained, quite a long list of questions remained about the occupation of the Brooke family, and also the transition from a religious function of the site through to the Brooke family home. So looking for archaeological traces of this became an important part of our research and how we were going to push the organisation forward. I'm really hoping this is going to work, because this is a basement. They're using the basement plan, and we've combined it with some photographs of the mansion house that we've got in the archive, and also in a little bit later in the sequence a 3D scan of some of the trenches that we'd opened more recently on the area that we thought was the wing of the manor house. It's one of the projects that we've been doing with the team at the Science and Technology Facilities Council up at Daresbury. They're literally 5 minutes up the road, so why wouldn't you? This really helps to make the invisible building, or at least now invisible building, much more understandable to our visitors. And it's also featured as part of a project that was showcased when, has anybody heard of Riches, the new science project? So on their launch event, this project featured along with some work we've done on St Christopher with them as well. You can see those trenches now just being aligned with the basement plan. As mentioned, by the mid-2000s, the original museum had come to the end of its life. You can see that on the top left there. And thanks to the Heritage Lottery and other supporters, we started our capital development project in 2014. You can see the exterior of the old museum there with the Victorian porch. and that is actually on the footprint of the Abbot's Tower, and you can see the roof on the 12th century undercroft. There's a spiral staircase, believe it or not, just there that led up to a very small viewing gallery that allowed you to see about a 2-metre wide window onto the excavated remains, so it wasn't the best view in the world. But now we have a much more usable space. Our St Christopher statue is pride of place as you arrive at Norton Priory, as he should be, and you can see we've just done exactly as the Brooke family had done and encased the undercroft in yet another building. The small viewing gallery on the first floor space has gone, and we've transformed that with a full-length gallery for interpretation and display. And you now, fortunately, get pretty much a 360-degree view of the ruins. We've also got a cafe, very important if you're planning on coming to visit. We've got 2 education rooms and a small shop. The ground floor gallery is much larger, and I'm very happy to say, the curator in me at least, is very happy to say we've got all of the significant finds are on display. But more importantly, I think at this stage in the story, is what about the people who were there before we were? Well, they were Augustinian canons, and they had an active role within the community, so they weren't shut off from the community, and they had a very strong commitment to the care of the sick and the infirm. If you're all aware of St Bart's Hospital in London as an example, to give you how strong this healthcare was for them, and that was actually an original Augustinian foundation. And this part of Norton Priory's backstory is very much important in the way that we're moving the trust into the next 50 years. 130 articulated medieval skeletons were excavated in the 70s and the 80s, and they all, or some of them, show an unusually high percentage of people who'd suffered with a bone condition called Paget's disease of bone. I always ask this question: has anybody ever heard of Paget's disease of bone? Okay, this is also good news. I hope it's because of Norton Priory. Okay, that's good. Paget's is currently the second commonest metabolic disorder after osteoporosis, and within the UK, the northwest of England has a concentration in this part of the world. The UK generally has highest prevalence of Paget's in the world, and the important thing to consider is you can be born with a genetic predisposition to develop Paget's disease, but there is an environmental trigger. And if you aren't exposed to that environmental trigger, then Paget's will keep away from you. The important part is that clinicians, even today, do not know what that environmental trigger is. So what is it? Well, very briefly, basically healthy bone is pretty much like a very strong, well-constructed brick wall. It's got lots of interlocking parts to it, like you see on the left there. With Paget's, that remodeling process becomes very chaotic and it speeds up quite rapidly. So the bones become much more thicker, but a lot weaker, unfortunately. Just very quickly, you can see the lytic phase in that X-ray. The X-ray part is very important to this story. In 2005, we identified 6 adult males. You can see the red parts there that have seen macroscopically with Paget's disease. The research showed by X-ray, you can see they're very much more badly affected once you take a look at the yellow on through the X-rays. So we've gone in to question what happened at Norton Priory in terms of this particular bone condition. Rob Layfield at Nottingham University took some samples, and his team of protein biochemists. First, we think anyway, we were the first team to diagnose an ancient non-infectious disease using protein sequencing. So I think that was an important thing. And not only that, but we also have a sarcoma in a 13th century male skeleton. We took a sample from this to see if we could identify what we call microRNAs. We didn't even know if microRNAs still existed in ancient bone. Not only did we find that they do actually survive in ancient bone, but the microRNA that is morphing in Paget's disease in modern day populations is exactly the same microRNA that's morphing in our collection. So that gives you an idea of just how important this research is being. We were funded by the Paget's Association, and we also put a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2019. We've been on telly. We were a part of the Bone Detectives on Channel 4 in 2020. We also shared our medieval murder mystery. I'm not going to tell you about that, not just because I haven't got time, but I'm going to tempt you to come and watch the interactive on our gallery on your next visit. We all know Alice. Alice likes us, and she even liked us enough in her most recent book, Crypt, and to write a chapter about Paget's research we've done. So if you get hold of a copy, please read Mystery at a Priory. We've got the interpretation of all of this scientific discoveries on our ground floor gallery. That includes interviews with patients who are suffering with Paget's disease to explain how important it is. So where are we up to now? Well, we know we have at least 18 of those 130 in the collection that have got Paget's disease, but we think we might actually have as many as 28. So we really need to get our skates on to try and find out exactly what's happening at Norton Priory. We know there would have been an infirmary. We need to add that to our wish list in terms of excavation, and I really must give a big shout out to Harold and his team. We joined forces with them in 2018, I think it was, to see if we could identify the location of the infirmary, a burial ground for the canons, and also to carry on looking for that wing of the manor house. Good news is we've been able to find quite a few elements of that. This season, you can see on the left there, we've definitely got a rather large and substantial medieval building. Jury's still out a little bit, I think, on whether we've actually got the infirmary, so please keep your fingers crossed for me, because that's going to be an exciting element to add to Norton's stories going forward. Stories going backwards, well, Patrick Green has still my go-to phone for everything about Norton Priory. He's put all of his memories into a rather lovely book to celebrate our Golden Jubilee this year, and it's available in our museum shop if anybody's particularly interested. But that's a really nice, it's much more useful, I have to tell you, than any museum or archive catalogue or site diary. If you can actually get in the first person description about how things were discovered, then I'd go for it. In 2023, we became a national portfolio organisation. So if you take a look at our website, we now do a lot more events and activities. We've developed or invited the next generation to come and take part in deciding what's going to happen for the next 50 years at Norton Priory. So we've got a youth panel. Their aim is to guide the Priory across the next 50 years whilst honouring its diverse past and supporting our local community. That's their words, not mine. So I think that I'm very excited to find out what they're going to do. And then very lastly, I promise, Liz, we are happy to announce that we are now working with colleagues over at Vanderbilt Medical Centre on their project Health Over Time. We're waiting for more results from the Crick Institute and their Ancient Genome Project, but this is an international project, and again, I think it's just an indication of just how important all medieval human remains collections could be to identifying or tracking progressions of diseases, because I think in the end it's a good way of using archaeology to try and help us improve our lifespan and our health in modern day populations. I think that's a unique thing for archaeology generally. So what can I tell you about the next 50? Well, from my experience, make friends with scientists. They're lovely. They know a lot of clever things. If you have the ability to work with excavators from your site who may now be retired and have a lot of free time, do it. They're going to know your site better than you do. I think the last 50 years have had some real career highlights for me that I wasn't expecting. I'm expecting the next 50 years at Norton to have exactly the same thing, but most importantly for the next 50 years, have a lot of fun. Thank you.